its nationality, close parentheses, performed any of the acts and conditions listed under acts or conditions on the reverse side of this application, parentheses, unless explanatory statement is attached, close parentheses. Again, I declare under penalty of perjury that the statements made on this application are true and correct. Now, my questions, if you are looking at this with me, fine-tune. Why are there two separate political statuses, either a citizen of the United States or a non-citizen national? Now, those terms are what they call mutually exclusive. They have no relationship to each other because the second one is a non of the first one. So obviously they're different, and obviously they're distinct, and obviously they're important because they've mentioned it twice in this oath. But this is the real important thing that most people would never get unless they know the enemy as well as I do, is in the last part of the oath under the acts and conditions, it said if you violated any of those to attach a statement. But yet, when it comes to the important political status differences of two mutually exclusive political statuses, they tell you on the very front of the form, couched in warning language in ultra fine font. You don't think that's intentional, do you? Let me explain to you and the American people and people all over the world exactly what has happened. Is America, starting before the Civil War, where this obviously was planned, has been put into a Freemason trap. And you are the man that has allowed me to explain it. Because what you've done, Ed, is that you've gone into the triangle with the all-seeing eye. And you picked that eye out and you exposed it to the world. And in doing so, I'm able to expose the entire rest of their scheme. And the first leg of this Babylonian three-sided trap was set into place after the Civil War when black men were given federal citizenship. And they gave them a secondary citizenship. And that's the first leg of the three-sided trap. The second leg of that trap was put in when the Federal Reserve Act was passed in 1913, allowing the money powers, of which so many famous people had made so many high-profile comments about, and they allowed them to take over the government. Then we had the Depression in the 1930s when the system of government was changed from the previous one that we had experienced for over 150 years, and a new system of law that we're not familiar with, but has a 1,000-year precedent, the feudal system from Europe, was brought into the country for the first time under the auspices or the guise of the 14th Amendment. This is not my opinion. On the website, Ed, a U.S. passport for, the number 4ed.com, we have the site from a very famous high-profile case in the United States Supreme Court. In fact, it's one of the most important cases that the Supreme Court has ever decided. It's not about blacks. It's about Chinese. And the case is U.S. versus Wong Kim Ark. And the decision, dissenting, not the majority, the minority, the dissenting opinion was written by the sitting Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Chief Justice Fuller. And rather than read it here, I have it posted on the website because Chief Justice Fuller said exactly that in one of the most important cases ever decided by our High Court. And that is that the 14th Amendment brought the common law rule from England, which is the feudal system, into our country for the first time, just as England was being relieved of its inconvenience. And it laid there from the 1860s until the 1930s. And on March the 9th of 1933, when the United States was declared bankrupt, and the money powers took our gold and they substituted the people as collateral in this new feudal legal system that no one has ever recognized. If you go back to one of our important founding documents, the Declaration of Independence, personally, I think is the most important political document ever penned. And Thomas Jefferson in there lists the offenses against the king by the colonists. And one of the offenses right at the start is he has brought in a foreign jurisdiction. Do you think the feudal era and feudal law in the United States of America could be considered a foreign jurisdiction? You bet. Especially when it's hidden and disguised as masterfully as our traditional enemies have done. So the second leg was the government. The third leg, after the Depression, was set in place right at the start of World War II, when everyone was distracted and no one is noticed. And they put the third blocking leg in by disguising the original citizen as a U.S. national. And the disguise that the entire country is under, Ed, and whoever may be listening to this morning or this evening or whenever you're viewing it, this is the simulation, is that you think you're free and you are literally in a legal system that is the feudal system with 1,000 years of legal precedent, where the most important thing is that you are property. Ed, and anyone who may be listening to this that is moved by this message, let me explain to you the two things that happen when you file a declaration and you submit it with a DS-11 form to the State Department. The first thing it does is it qualifies you to move back from civil rights, privileges, if you will, given to you by the federal government, to whom you owe the duty, and it moves you back over under God's rights with constitutional protections. So when that happens, the first thing is all of the administrative agency's jurisdiction sheds from you. The IRS, the OSHA, EPA, all of the other over 250 federal agencies that plague our country today. I mentioned a minute ago the statement from Thomas Jefferson about bringing in a foreign jurisdiction. The other statement that's in that list of grievances against the king is one that I committed to memory 20 years ago. And it could have been written yesterday. And it says, "He has erected multitudes of offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass us and eat out our substance." Do you feel like your substance has been eaten out? Do you feel like you've been harassed? Those words could have been written yesterday. The same thing that we're dealing with today is the same thing our forefathers fought 250 years ago. Let me tell you part of the reason this message is so important to me is when I was in my 20s, because of my grandfather and his brother's genealogical interest and work, I was informed that the Sales family was one of the original families that founded the country. They were on the Mayflower. And it wasn't as important to me then, in my 20s and earlier life, as it has become now in this project, because now my herediment's on the line. And if you want to use the colloquial term, I got a dog in this fight. Recently, I realized that my mother, being part American Indian, gave me 2 dogs in this fight, because they didn't like being enslaved either. So this is important to me, and I think it's important to you. And I know it's important not only to our country, our future, but the entire future of the world hinges on this, because it's through this mechanism, Ed, and America, that our traditional enemies have taken control of our country first, and by the utilization of a debt money currency, the world.